Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Richie Kotzen solo album Nomad. Former Poison, former Mr. Big guitar player releasing his 22nd solo album. Just came out on Friday, September 27th of 2024. I'm going to break it all down here. I'll get into it, do a full review and unboxing for you guys. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you're going to stay up to date on everything going on in the world of music, just like this, with a special review for the brand new Richie Kotzen solo album, Nomad. And this one is a good one. He's got to be one of the most underrated guitarists and vocalists in all of rock, and we're going to talk about that here. But I want to jump back, give you guys a little bit of history for those of you that don't know about him, but it also sets up where I want to go with this, which is starting in 1989, Richie started out his career on Shrapnel Records as one of Mike Varney's guitar shredders. And it really showed his prowess on those first three albums. Two of them were instrumentals, but one of them, the second album, Fever Dream, actually had him singing on, showing an entirely different side to Richie. And his vocal style is a lot like Eric Martin of Mr. Big. And I quite frankly believe that if he had not made it as a guitarist, he would have absolutely made it as a vocalist. He is just that good at both things. But then again, he also plays all instruments, bass, drums, keyboards, you name it. He is a master at all of them. And some of those people are just that way, and Richie is one of them. Now, from 1991 to 93, Richie joined Poison. He recorded their fourth studio album together, Native Tongue. But following that, which didn't last that long, he returned to solo recording. And then from 1999 to 2002, Richie joined Mr. Big, recording two studio albums with them, Get Over It in 1999 and Actual Size in 2001. But Mr. Big subsequently broke up following their Japanese tour supporting Actual Size, and the band itself, meaning Mr. Big, wouldn't, become reactive again until 2009, but that's the original lineup. And so following Mr. Big, again, Richie returns to his solo recordings in various projects, and he has certainly done a lot of them. And one notable project amongst all of those is the supergroup Winery Dogs, which of course has Richie Kotzen on guitar and vocals, really showing his prowess on both instruments there. But we've also got fellow Mr. Big member Billy Sheehan on bass, and then Dream Theater drummer Mike Portnoy. So you got those three guys who are specialists in their field all coming together to really create something special. They've recorded three albums together, which I think has really helped bring Richie Kotzen more to the forefront than he ever had been for many of his previous projects, including his time in Mr. Big and Poison. Doing the Winery Dogs has really put the spotlight on him. And so another notable project is the duo Smith-Kotzen, where joining Richie is Iron Maiden guitarist Adrian Smith. And those two guys coming together, releasing one full-length album and another album that is made up of two EPs. They're also currently working on a brand new album, but in the meantime, we're getting this new solo album from Richie Kotzen, Nomad, the one we want to talk about here. So this is released by BMG Music. It's his 22nd solo album. And this is not counting all the other albums and things that he's done as part of different projects like Poison, Mr. Big, Winery Dogs, Smith-Kotzen, and a whole host of other ones here. On this album, it's only got 8 songs though, and clocks in at 35 minutes, which is a lot shorter than most of the albums we get from Richie. But then again, it seems to be a real trend that's going on in the industry today, where albums are 45 minutes or less, which I think has a lot to do with the whole vinyl popularity thing. We're trying to get everything to fit on the length of a vinyl album. But the other kind of trend seems to be where albums are more than 7 songs, but less than 10. So gone are the days where most albums have more than 10 songs on it. And, there was a time and period where if you didn't have about 15 songs on your album, it wasn't an album length. That was in the early 90s era of things, but that seems to be gone these days. And a lot of bands are putting out the 8, 9, and 10 song albums. But this one here, clocking in at only 35 minutes. It'd be a different story if the 8 songs were long and we were still getting 45 plus minutes worth of music. But the thing is, all the songs on here are really good. And of course, the old saying, all killer, no filler, really applies to this instance here. That's the first thing I noticed about this album is how good it all is, and that there aren't any songs on here that I want to skip over or that I get bored during or anything of that nature. It's all very interesting stuff, and it's all very unique sounding as well, as sometimes the stuff can tend to sound repetitious, but I found it not to be the case on these 8 songs here. And the stuff that's on here also really kind of screamed the guitar shred style of Richie's first 3 albums. And so I hadn't heard that from his solo releases in quite some time, as he tended to do that outside of his solo material and let his solo stuff really be something else. And at least what, I don't even want to say in recent times, because at least the last 20 years or so, he would usually have 1 or 2 rock songs on the album, maybe even being the opening track or the first single, but that was not characteristic of what the albums were. On the albums, he would then venture off into territory of blues, soul, funk, R&B, stuff like that. And while we still have that on this album here, it's much more integrated within the guitar shred style of stuff. And so this album here really jumped off the page at me right from the get-go, made a huge impression, more so than any of his other 21 solo albums having been released. I personally think this one here might be his best out of all solo albums released, but previously, I would have said that my favorite solo album from him being his second, Fever Dream, in 1990, and that was his first album with vocals on it. I absolutely love because of the melding of the guitar shred and his killer vocal style, and it being a fully rock-related release, followed by maybe Motherhead's Family Reunion. It's a bit of a tongue twister to say that. 1994 album, that was the first one he made after leaving Poison, so it brought over some of those same sounds and styles from Native Tongue, and those were always really good. But his last album, 50 for 50, which was released in 2020 and unfortunately got lost a little bit within the pandemic and what was going on, was a sprawling triple album, and where each album was sequenced to be a standalone album and to be listened to that way. Honestly, 50 songs to digest as an album was a bit too much for me, on the thing as a whole. And so perhaps because he had done 50 songs for turning 50 for that triple album in 2020, maybe that's partly why this album is much shorter at 8 songs and only 35 minutes. I don't know, but it is short, sweet, and to the point, and you don't have time to really get bored of this thing. So let's talk about some of the great songs that make this thing up. Track number 1, Cheap Shots. This was the first single that was released from the album. Even before the album was announced, this song came out. It was a killer, hard-driving rock song, and it really was kind of right in your face. And while we didn't yet know it, it really does set the tone for the album as a whole. And I like where that is when you start the album and and you go from there, and it's just kind of very killer. But this song here, in my opinion, is very close to Winery Dogs material, much in the way the whole album is, but this song in particular. And I'd be curious to know if this was one that was actually written for the Winery Dogs, left over, and that's where it comes from, or did he actually write it for this solo release here? I'm just kind of curious where Richie's head was at for this album and how the material generated, being that it is so different from past solo recordings. Track 2, These Doors. This one here starts off with some funky bass playing on it, making me think that Billy Sheehan, his fellow Winery Dogs member and Mr. Big Bassist, guested on this one here. But after checking, no, in fact, Richie plays the bass on it, as he does all other instruments on this release, with the exception of 2 tracks where he has other drummers come in. But Richie plays the guitar, the bass, the keyboards, the guitar. He sings, he plays drums, produces, writes, just everything on here, and it is really a testament to how skilled of a musician he actually is. Track 6, On the Table. This one here sounds like it could have appeared on any of the Mr. Big albums that Richie was part of. The whole thing just screams their style, in my opinion, and it's really refreshing to hear Richie revisit that style on a track here. Definitely one of my favorites for this album. All right, and the last one to talk about here is track number 8, Nihilist. It's the final track on the album. It's a great way to close out the album. Starts off melodic and beautiful before it builds into a really powerful song. It's got full-on classic shred style that we love from Richie, but it's also got his very soulful vocals, and it really blends those two things perfectly here, just showing what a master of both he really is. So let's take a look at this. Here's our front cover. It's kind of an interesting shot there with Richie in the foreground and the mountain scenery in the background there, calling it Nomad, seeing, nothing else around except him. And then we got the tracks here. And of course, if we open this up, while it doesn't really continue the shot through it very well, can feel like it here. It's just kind of a zoomed in shot without Richie on it. But there you go, 4 tracks per, list like that. I assume that's the way it would break up on vinyl. And then here we go, we've got a zoomed in shot of Richie there in the background and everything, very nicely done. CD in this back part here, typical, no, protective thing around it. And in the front part of it here, we get the booklet. So let's take a quick peek at that. Nothing too special about this here. It's got the lyrics in here. Of course, since he plays all the instrumentation, it's not breaking down any of that sort of stuff. But what is really nice is this part here where Richie writes a nice little thing explaining the album and his thoughts and what he played and who played on it, meaning those 2 extra drummers and stuff like that. So you do get a little something extra, in my opinion, like that in the back cover of it there. So not a lot of shots or photos of Richie in there. They seem to take the one album cover shot and just use it in multiple ways. I understand probably all that stuff costs a lot of money, and when you're on a budget like Richie would be, as not being the biggest musician in the world, sometimes you have to do that, so I kind of get it. But let's say bottom line on this thing here. So first of all, this album was a breath of fresh air for me. I've always enjoyed Richie's solo material, so definitely no surprise there that I was going to enjoy this or like it. But I've always thought Richie was better in the band situation when he has someone he can bounce things off of, maybe helps reel him in a bit. And when he does the solo albums, much like this one, where he plays everything, produces everything, he's in charge of it 100%. Sometimes I find it to be a bit sprawling and it runs on into too many different styles. But amazingly enough, for this album here, that was not the case at all. Somehow this one here seemed to stay reeled into one particular style overall, one defining style, because we still get some of that blues and funk and other stuff on here, but it's integrated so well that you feel like you're listening to one cohesive album. And I'm a big fan of cohesiveness, where albums have their peaks and valleys and their differences and things amongst it, but it all feels like it comes from the same person, the same artist. There's a cohesive style throughout, and we're definitely getting it on here. And I think this is much in the vein of the band projects that he has been part of. So if you're a fan of Poison, Mr. Big, Winery Dogs, or Smith Kotzen, meaning the times that he has been part of all of those, this album here I think is very much for you. And I'd highly recommend you checking this out. Even beyond just the people that are fans of Richie Kotzen, this one here is an amazing guitar shred fest and soulful rock vocal album that could be a bigger thing should more people give it an opportunity and a try. So there you go. That's my review for the brand new Richie Kotzen Nomad solo album, his 22nd. I'm just stunned by that fact that he has that many solo albums beyond all the different band projects and things that he does as well. He's truly a prophetic, musical person, churning stuff out left and right all the time. And thank goodness for that, and for us music fans of his, where we can get so much great music from him. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.